Welcome to our Expert Dispatch. I am Bashira Meet, Assistant Editor and Researcher at the Center for Strategic and Contemporary Research. Today we are joined by Dr. Akis Kalaitzidis, a Professor of International Relations and Comparative Politics at the University of Central Missouri. He holds a Master and PhD in Political Science from the Temple University in Philadelphia. Beyond his academic role, he has served as a Rotary Peace Fellow and directed Missouri program Ghana and Greece. He is the author of Europe Greece, A Giant in Making, and co editor of US Foreign Policy, a documentary and reference guide. He is highly respected scholar in US foreign policy, global geopolitical dynamics, and international security. Professor, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Let's start the discussion. As we witness a shifting global order, especially with the rise of China, understanding the evolution of United States strategy in Asia is more critical than ever. Asia has become the most consequential and dynamic region. It comprises half of the world population and generates 60% of the world GDP. It has become the focal point of US foreign policy for years. The region is driving two-thirds of the global economic growth, and has significant stake with annual trade surpassing 2 trillion and nearly 1 trillion in regional investment. United States future is deeply intertwined with Asia as it has invested hugely to build collective capacity. Professor, in the light of the evolving dynamic in the region, how would you describe the evolution of US foreign policy in Asia? What are the key movements that have shaped its current trajectory?
U.S. foreign policy in the Indo-Pacific has been a very lengthy process. It goes back to the 1800s with the United States involvement in China being instrumental in keeping China intact the way we know it today. The United States has been very focused in the Indo-Pacific area, especially China.
Okay. Can you elaborate on the Obama and Trump administration policies and the current Biden policy in the region?
Yeah, the the differences are in the uniqueness of the American system, in its openness, and the idea that it does better with the interaction with democratic states. However, China has been a very big and important player in world politics since the 1970s. It has been the economy has been expanding tremendously, and the United States is part of this expansion, and had to adjust over time because the Chinese economy has expanded so much so rapidly that it has threatened the competitiveness of the American markets, and has brought somewhat a bit of a confrontational situation with the Trump administration with the trade war that he started, that it seems to be being picked up by the Biden administration as well in certain areas, such as, for example, electric cars, which the Chinese seem to be surging ahead of their competitors. The United States has put a limit on those imports, and and there are several other areas in which the Trump administration attempted to contain the Chinese expansion. I think the Biden administration has seen it a little different. I mean, they're still keeping this, I would call it protectionist attitude towards China in terms of trade, but they also have engaged several other countries in the region in order to not contain, but in order to multilateralize the relations. For example, India, Taiwan, of course, as always, are okay, and Japan and Thailand, for sure.
Thank you, Professor, for the overview. So, what do you see as the primary strategic objective of U.S. foreign policy in Asia? Is it the containment of China or anything else? And how should
Well, yeah, I the strategic objectives they don't necessarily impact the region negatively. It's not about competition so much. It's about building long-lasting relationships with Indo-Pacific nations. That, of course, would include China if China was democratic, but it's not. So, therefore, the United States has focused on a free and open Indo-Pacific for the partners that they have chosen. A prosperous Indo-Pacific. It's a very important element of the strategy of the United States to promise development to its partners in the region, and has delivered. I mean, we look at Korea, for example, and Taiwan from the 40s on. We see great development in those nations and advancement, a great advancement, and that advancement is promised to other partners in the Indo-Pacific region if they interact with the United States, stay connected, and then of course there's security, which is the other side of the foreign affairs. It's not only an economic relationship; it's also a military relationship. And now that India uh, become has risen and has become a little more independent from its former Soviet ties, the United States sees it as an inevitable rise, and would like to engage with India in a very constructive way to promote resilience in democracy in the Indian subcontinent, and connected us with the United States, and of course security at the end of the day.
thank you so much. So, did you think that U.S. need an articulate foreign policy towards China in order to manage the competition effectively?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Okay, I'm just saying that can we say that US need an articulate policy towards China in order to manage this competition effectively?
What is the Indian card? The what is the United States managing the competition with China? Is I can't get the first part.
What I'm saying is, does US need an articulate foreign policy towards China? A good policy, maybe articulate one.
I see. I see. I mean, there's no. You're talking about a doctrine, a presidential doctrine towards foreign relations with China. I'm not sure that there is a need for it. The Chinese American relationship is complex. It's multi-level. It is. It is not a one that is only competition. It is also cooperation. I cannot think of China decoupled from the United States at this point. At any, and eventually the United States is also looking to multilateralize relations in Asia, and therefore to be able to manage prospective problems such as the healthcare, for example, during COVID, with many partners, as opposed to going it alone. So I'm not sure that a doctrine towards China or towards the East Asia is necessary beyond what beyond what the United States government has put forward. But they have put forward several ideas, the ideas that I've just highlighted, of democratic free and open
In the past.
Indian subcontinent and Indo-Pacific, prosperous, secure, resilient, and all that.
Okay. So, with that analysis in mind, it is important to consider the role of India. With India becoming a more central focus of US foreign policy, do you think US is placing too many expectations on this partnership?
Yeah, that's a difficult question to answer. I do realize that the latest rapprochement between India and the United States is creating some uh, attracting some attention. Let's put it this way from the neighborhood. The United States is putting a lot of stock into the relationship with India. They regard Indians' rise as inevitable, and they want to be partners with democratic India. Now there are problems with that relationship, um, mostly in the political sense, with the Modi government being a bit nationalistic and Hindutva around the country on the rise. That may create problems in the future. But for right now, the United States is zeroing in the, I would say, prosperity part of the pact and trying to help India rise as a counterweight to China.
Yeah, it's clear that India's role is in US strategy is multifaceted and it's evolving. As we reflect on India's significance, it's crucial to consider how the leadership in Washington shape these dynamics. Professor, if Donald Trump or Kamala Harris were to take office, how might their approach differ in managing US relation with China? In Asia, particularly China, and what implication could these differences have for regional stability?
Yeah. Well, with the elections coming, we have a very tight election in the United States, and two competitors that have talked about China quite extensively, especially President Trump. With President Trump, we know where we stand because he has been president in the past, and he uh, led an adversarial type of relationship with China, with a trade war that he started with Vice President Kamala Harris. We're not exactly 100% sure where she's going to land if she wins, but we have certain statements that tell us that certain parts of the economic competition will continue with China. There will be, for example, protection in some domestic industries in the United States versus the Chinese expansion. But I do expect the Harris administration to be more multilateral and less unilateral than the Trump administration, if that means anything to you.
Okay, thank you. In a recent foreign policy article, the former Assistant Secretary of the State for Europe and Eurasia and the Professor of Politics at Catholic University of America wrote, US strategy should prioritize Europe before Asia. Without a stable and secure Europe, the United States risks becoming a regional power sideline on the global stage. There has been a growing concern over the past year that the war in Ukraine has diverted US focus away from Asia. How accurate this perception is, and what impact does this potential shift have on US economic and strategic influence in Asia?
The war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine has dominated American foreign policy in Europe. There is no two ways about it. The Russian side invaded Ukraine with specific strategic aims in mind that the United States opposes, that Europe opposes. Europe is more focused on Ukraine than the United States is, despite the pronouncements of the United States administration. The Europeans have provided a lot more weaponry and money to Ukraine than the United States yet. There is significant opposition in the United States Congress to providing Ukraine with more weaponry. Now, all of this does not mean that the United States has taken its eye off of the Indo-Pacific. I would disagree that there is some kind of either or. So I believe the United States is clearly focused on China, and it will be a major part of any U.S. administration's foreign policy, regarding, especially certain with a certain flexing of the muscles of the Chinese government in terms of the South China Sea and in terms of Taiwan. These things can be very tense, and dangerous in the short term in foreign policy. So that you cannot take your eye off of it. So I don't think I would say that the war in Ukraine has taken the focus off of the Indo-Pacific. If anything, this sort of uh, forces the United States to view the Indo-Pacific with a little more urgency, seeking allies in the world against authoritarian regimes, for example.
Thank you so much for sharing your valuable insight with us today. So we conclude on this note that Asia remain a dynamic and crucial region for U.S. foreign policy, and navigating these complexities require thoughtful and strategic engagement. Thank you so much.
Thank you for everything.
Goodbye.